The last team we have to talk about is the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals offense this year has a few concerns, but Joe Burrow definitely isn't one of them. There's been a lot of talks about Joe Burrow's durability. I'm not concerned about it. When Joe Burrow is healthy, the Cincinnati Bengals are a Super Bowl contender every single season. He's the only quarterback that's active that has defeated Patrick Mahomes in a postseason game. The only quarterback that's beaten Patrick Mahomes in the postseason is Tom Brady. So Joe Burrow, until somebody else is able to take down Patrick Mahomes and Burrowhead, he's still the second best quarterback in the National Football League to me. The question is, who the hell is going to replace Joe Mixon? You signed Zach Moss to a 2-year deal worth $8 million in free agency, and he was really good for Indianapolis last year. You guys may not remember this, but Jonathan Taylor, when he was having his little dispute with Indianapolis and he also had the injury bug, Zach Moss was top 5 in the league in rushing yards. And then once Jonathan Taylor came back, he got phased out of the offense because they had just gave him a fresh contract extension. So, of course, they had to give Jonathan Taylor the workload. But getting Zach Moss was a really good deal, and you get him for a way cheaper price than what you was paying Joe Mixon. Last year for Indy, he was averaging 4.3 yards per carry. He had 5 touchdowns and 794 rushing yards. You also got Chase Brown, who was drafted by Cincy in the 2023 draft. He was a 5th-round pick out of Illinois. He's going to be the Bengals' change of pace back, has really good speed. He'll probably be a bigger factor in the passing game than what Zach Moss is going to be. The only problem is that I don't think that he has great vision. And for a guy his size, you expect him to be a little bit more explosive. But overall, I think your running back room is pretty set. It really just comes down to how well your offensive line is going to play. And that's probably the biggest concern that you should have if you're a Cincinnati Bengals fan, because this offensive line has been a serious problem ever since you first drafted Joe Burrow. And despite how much money you've invested into this part of the offense, it still had to produce the way that you thought it would. Last year, you were 25th in sacks per game allowed. Orlando Brown has looked like a massive overpay. You signed Chip Brown in free agency, but he may just be a holdover until Marius Mims is ready to replace him and end up taking one of those starting jobs. He was a 1st-round pick by the Bengals out of Georgia. And Georgia offensive linemen normally produce at a really high level in the NFL. When you draft the Georgia offensive lineman, you normally are in pretty good hands. Marius Mims, this dude is an athletic monster, really big in stature, has really good speed, really strong. He's a mauler in the run game. The only question is, how fast is he going to be able to improve? You know, his footwork still is a little bit shoddy. His technique needs a little bit more refinement. Now, when it comes to the interior of your offensive line, outside of Alex Kappa, Cordell Volson, who was a mid-round selection in 2022, this guy has not looked it. You know, there was one game that he had when PFF graded him out to have a 9 or 0 pass blocking grade. He's pretty decent as a run blocker, but when it comes to pass protection, this dude is a huge liability. And then you still got center Ted Karras, who is pretty solid. But your offensive line is going to make or break this team this year. Because, yeah, you lose Joe Mixon, but you can make up for that as long as your offensive line is still able to create holes in the run lane. The wide receiver position, you know about Jamar Chase and how good he is, but what about T. Higgins? Is he going to play this year? He's the only player that's been given the franchise tag who hasn't signed his tender yet. I doubt that he holds out into this season. I don't think that that would work in his benefit. And I get that you want a long-term deal, but you are going to be making, what, 20-plus million this year on the tag. Hopefully the brother doesn't get injured. And you know, it is pretty wrong how Cincinnati is doing them right now, bro. The dude wants to get a long-term extension for you, bro, and you're not paying him. And I don't get why you wouldn't pay T. Higgins when you should want to keep that core around between him and Jamar Chase. I know you don't got a lot of money to keep everybody happy, but if there are some other players that you got to let go, such as Trey Hendrickson, to keep T. Higgins, I think that would be a smarter move. Trey Hendrickson starting to get on the older side of football age. I think with T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, and Joe Burrow having such a good connection, you would want to keep that duo together, similar to what the Cincinnati Bengals did for all those years with Carson Palmer when they had T.J. Houshmandzadeh and Chad Ochocinco. So I really don't agree with how Cincinnati is handling the T. Higgins contract dispute. Like, just pay the brother what he wants, bro. If the brother wants to get paid like a number one, pay him like a number one. Because on any other team, he'll be a number one wide receiver. So why would you try to give this guy number two money? You know, I don't think you can ever go wrong with investing in your wide receiving core when, you know, Joe Burrow does need weapons to still be really good. Now, you did draft Jermaine Burton in the 3rd round of this year's draft. He has a lot of upside, and we never got to see Jermaine Burton playing at his full potential at any point throughout his college career. I felt like his tape at Georgia before he transferred to Bama was better than what he put on display for the Crimson Tide. He has pretty good size. He reminds me a little bit of Jamar Chase, you know, pretty physical. He'll run a few guys over with the ball in his hands, but he's a really good deep threat. This is somebody who can win those one-on-one matchups downfield. He's a really good red zone target for you also. But once you get past T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, and Jermaine Burton, the wide receiving core becomes incredibly concerning. You got Charlie Jones, who you drafted last year out of Purdue. He's more of a slot guy. He's not the most athletic guy. He is a pretty decent route runner, but he isn't really anybody that's going to wow you. You got Trent Irwin, who doesn't really wow you neither. And, you know, if either T. Higgins or Jamar Chase goes down, I think they're going to be in a ton of trouble. But you did sign Mike Gesicki. You re-signed Drew Sample. I think the thing with Mike Gesicki is that he's still a really good tight end. He just has been underutilized. I thought that they would have used Irv Smith a lot more than what they did, but I guess this offense just tends to favor wide receivers a lot more than they do the tight ends. But Mike Gesicki is really athletic. He has pretty good hands. I've seen him make a ton of crazy catches and double coverage. He can be really good in the red zone for you also. Not really a good run blocker, which is probably the reason why, you know, he hasn't really stuck with a ton of teams. But I think for Cincinnati, offensively, you could be so good if your offensive line could finally play up to the kind of money that you're paying a lot of those guys, man, because they did invest a lot of money into the offensive line. It's not like they're not trying. It's just that, you know, trying isn't good enough. You know, if you want Joe Burrow to win you a Super Bowl, you need this offensive line to play at an elite level. Now, Cincinnati, they believe that this is finally the year that they can get this old line to finally gel and to finally come together, but I'm just going to take a wait-and-see approach with Cincy because this offensive line has been a problem for the last 4 years.